Managers. What is the silliest reason you have had an employee call in sick? A friend of mine, when he was in his early 20s, called in drunk. Friend, I can't come in. I'm a pretty drunk. Boss, oh, you're sick and can't come in? Friend, no, I'm just drunk. Can't make it. Boss, no, you're sick. Right? Friend, nah man, I'm just kinda drunk. Boss, okay, I'm putting you down as sick. Get better soon. They're superstitious and refuse to work on any Friday that falls on the 13th because something bad always happens to them. The same person also once told me he cut his hand on a banana. We had this one guy who is constantly complaining about how broke he is and how he needs to work so badly, and yet he just didn't ever want to actually show up. Here's a selection of my favorite of his excuses. There was a construction truck parked blocking his driveway. I thought, why not ask them to move? Someone had allegedly been messing with him and slowly letting the air out of his tires. Clearly they couldn't possibly be leaking. They were only 5 years old. Someone had broken into his vehicle under cover of night, removed the motor that operates the windows, and replaced it with a burnt out one on the driver's side, so now his window barely works. I mean, the car's only about 13 years old. Couldn't be wearing out by itself. We offered this dude a full-time job with a guaranteed permanent position if he proves himself. He proved that he would rather come up with any reason to not work. Called in horny. He was trying for a baby. Couple was deemed infertile, going through all sorts of treatments and therapies. Dude calls into the manager and says his wife is ready. Manager told him to take the day off. A few months later they confirmed conception past 12 weeks. It was very exciting, but also strange. Had a lady call in and say she couldn't come into work because everything was wrong. I asked her to elaborate. She said Venus was retrograde with Mercury, and because she is a Capricorn she is vulnerable and can't come into work as everything is terrible. I'm like, you are trying to call off work because your horoscope is wrong? She screamed, OMG, I knew you wouldn't understand. You are such an Aries, and slammed the phone on me. She didn't last long. I used to work at a trampoline park, and we had one guy who was super greedy when taking parties. He called the store one day and would only speak to me since I was his favorite manager. He asked if there were any parties assigned to him, and I said no. He then replied with, I'm not coming in. I don't feel too good. I told my general manager, and he said bullshit, and wrote him up for it. Not actually a silly reason to work, but still it's kind of related. I work at a small fast food restaurant, and it has very few staff, way too few, if you ask me. I cover a lot of shifts for my boss, like sometimes twice a week. I called in sick one day, and no one could cover my shift. My boss managed to convince one of my co-workers to cover 1/3 of my shift. He then told me I owe him one. Fuck off, mate. You owe me way more than I owe you. She said her prostate was causing her problems. If she has one, I completely understand. More likely, she realized she was going to fail her probation and decided to be difficult. When making her morning coffee, grounds got in her cup, and then her creamer was bad. So because her coffee was all wrong she couldn't come into work that day. Not in a managing position, but man, I do love the stuff I hear in the office. During lunch break there was this overweight lady discussing something with a coworker. I didn't pick up the conversation, but all I heard was, your hate and negativity against me are so painful I might throw up. Half an hour later I hear from her boss that she threw up in the restroom and had to go home since she doesn't feel safe right now. Dude then asked me if I know anything, and I said no as I didn't want to get involved. He further asks how often I have been sick in the last 3 years. Tell him I have no recorded sick days in the last 3 years, and he just goes, wow, that must be hard. I'm like, TF. We were in the process of moving to another building. I got some equipment boxed, but then had an issue come up that I judged should take precedence. So I shifted my focus to that. Later got called into my manager's office and was getting asked if I had any physical issues that would stop me from helping with the office move. This one guy complained about me not helping. Turns out he was so upset that he had to leave for a couple of hours. Fuck you, Billy. Everyone knows you were cheating on your wife with Tracy. I've got back pain because I fell off the back of a motorcycle. That's fine, mate. come in when you're well. The doctor said it could be the motorcycle. Or it could be my office chair. Okay, well, if we are waiting on the results from the blood test, you're taking a blood test to see if your back pain is from sitting in an old chair or falling off a motorcycle? Yes. He just kept going until it was obvious he was lying. Had an employee that had her mother call out for her because she had a little too much to drink on her birthday. Real story. The daughter was in county lockup for meth possession. Found her mugshot online. Not a manager, but a team lead. Problem I have is getting too much info from those calling in sick. Really just MLs or IMs no one calls anymore. At my company you're not required to disclose the reason for taking the time, as long as you have it. Can't tell you how many times people start describing their effed up medical problems, and I'm just thinking please stop. I don't need to know. The vast majority are from our folks in our remote center in India. Some examples. I have an open sore on my face, some sort of fungus. My throat is swollen, and I'm coughing up pus. I'm having uncontrollable bowel movements. One of my employees was arrested for drug dealing, and I got another employee to cover his shift. The covering employee never showed up, never replied to calls or texts. I was worried enough that I had ours do a wellness check with their family. Turns out, she had car trouble that morning, well before her shift, which was also resolved well before her shift, but she was so angry over it, she just decided she couldn't work, and didn't want to talk to anyone, so she just didn't answer her phone. I fired both employees. It was a rough week. A girl called in once, because she had gotten back from vacation on Saturday and she needed another day to recover. It was Monday. She was PRN, and made her own schedule. She would also ask if she could come in a couple hours late. She worked as a tech in a hospital, so she would relieve someone else. I had someone call off because their electricity was out and she couldn't blow her hair dry. I told her to drive with her windows down and hung up. Had to fire her a few weeks later as she got arrested for beating up the new girlfriend of one of her baby daddies. Oh, I just had a good sick versus vacation day lie a few weeks ago. Not necessarily an excuse, but just a straight up lie. I run the rental department for a group of heavy duty truck dealerships, box trucks, 18-wheelers, dump trucks, school buses, etc., which means I end up going to the DMV a lot to get tags for new rental trucks, etc. I also have my two of my own separate shops from the rest of the dealership to work on my own trucks and my own trucks only. One Monday, I had a young, new mechanic call into my shop manager saying he'd caught a stomach bug over the weekend, wasn't feeling much better yet, hadn't slept, etc. Shop manager tells me he's out. My guys do the best they can, while down a mechanic. After lunch that day, I go to DMV to title and register 2 new trucks. Side note, in bigger towns, DMV will occasionally have separate windows for dealers and another for large fleets. Who do I see in the line for the general public registering his new crotch rocket? Guy who called in sick. I just called out his name quietly and waved, and told him I was glad he felt better. He used to call out sick every once in a while on a Monday. We usually assumed he was sleeping off a bender. Anyway, he hasn't called in sick on a Monday since then. I'm a manager, but my own boss calls in sick so frequently that we don't even ask why anymore. Oh, Devin is sick. Shocker. In the last 2 months he's had the chicken pox and like 3 colds. The kicker is that when I try to call out, happened once, I had a bad fever. He guilts me into working. He does the same to my employees. I also have an employee who goes home early all the time, once a week or so, because her daughter starts fights at school. So either she's lying, or her daughter is a very violent 4-year-old and someone should be concerned. 2 from me as the employee, and not the manager. I got bit by my cat, and had to go to the ER. I spent all night there. I had to get all sorts of IV antibiotics. I called my boss the next morning saying I couldn't come in for a cat bite. He said, "You are not coming in, because a cat bite, whatever." Click, I come in the next day all bandaged up, and he is apologizing. His wife is a nurse, and when he got home and told the story, she yelled at him and explained how serious it could be. The day prior I went tubing down a river and didn't put sunscreen on my legs and I'd get a bad sunburn. I can hardly stand or walk, it hurts so much. There is only me and another girl who do the job we do. She works AM and I PM. If one calls in sick they have to work a double. So I call in sick for a sunburn. She is like, whatever, it's kinda BS, but I'll cover for you. I come in the next day in shorts and sandals because I could not have pants touching my legs. Totally against dress code. She sees how bad the sunburn is and says, holy shit. I didn't realize how bad it was. Do you want to go home? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Goodbye.